Hi everyone, this is Erika from PrepScholar GMAT, and welcome to our live Q&A and GMAT advice session. Really quickly, I'm going to check in to make sure all of our audio and video is working okay. So I'm going to pop off screen, but I'll be right back so we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so it seems like everything's working a-okay. So again, welcome. Hi, my name is Erika John. I'm here with PrepScholar GMAT, and today we're going to have kind of a casual session, a live Q&A and GMAT advice. So here is an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have about really anything. So you can ask questions about signing up for the GMAT. You can ask questions about test day. You can ask questions about taking the GMAT. You can ask questions about studying for the GMAT. You can ask questions about a specific question type, your time management, anxiety, about a specific category within a question type that's throwing you off, a specific question you were working on last night. So anything kind of in the realm of GMAT, feel free to ask. You can also ask questions about the PrepScholar GMAT program. So you can ask about our online program, how our algorithm works to customize a study plan just for you. You can ask about our online tutoring, how you can work directly with me. You can ask about our small group classes. Lots of things to ask about. So if you are interested in asking any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat and I'll go ahead and answer them. We already have one. Awesome. So we have a question. Do I have to have work experience before going to B school for post-graduation? Not necessarily, but I would recommend it. In general, schools are looking for a couple years of work experience in a field that you would potentially be pursuing. So business related experience. So this could be consulting or something similar. Typically B schools are looking for like at least 2 years of experience. Something more along the lines of like 3 to 5 is often better. If you have less than that, that's okay. Some people get into B school with no work experience. That said, it's not the most common. Your application is going to have to be standout for that to happen. So in general, I would recommend getting some work experience first. It can also help put things in perspective about, do you actually want to go to B school? Is that the right move for you? Is there a way to pursue the same path without getting your degree? So yes, I would say going ahead and getting some work experience is going to be valuable for you. But is it a disqualifier if you don't have it? Not necessarily. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to follow up in the chat. Is there a limit of age to take the test? No. Nope. You can take it at any point. And in fact, folks who take the GMAT actually are very widely in age. I think the most common age for taking the GMAT, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it's around late 20s is a common age. That said, you can take it at any age. You can pursue your MBA goals at any point in your life. So no, go for it. If you want to, do it. Okay, got a few more. Perfect. Really excited. This is taking off. Okay. So Daniel says, hi, I've been preparing for the GMAT quite extensively. I set my first one in November. I've been studying quite hard, however, and I'm beginning to overwhelm myself. Any advice with regards to this? This is something I see a lot from my students and from folks online who ask questions. It is really easy to burn yourself out studying for the GMAT. And this isn't advice that most people want to hear, but if you're finding that you're not making the progress you want to, that you're just frustrating yourself and overwhelming yourself, maybe it's a better idea to push back your GMAT goals and to take the test later. Studying for the GMAT is intensive, especially if you're aiming for a high score or if your score goals are significantly off where you're starting. So I would recommend really prioritizing your mental and emotional health. If you can't sit for the exam, then it doesn't matter how much you've studied. So that balance is going to be important for you. Other things I would recommend, though, if you are pursuing that test date, would be really focusing on strategy. Try not to drill as much as you focus on learning from your mistakes. So prioritizing reviewing questions that you've missed, trying to figure out why you missed them, trying to figure out how you cannot miss them next time, trying to put them in buckets of certain question types and general strategies that you can apply. Doesn't really help if you figure out how to solve one problem but can't apply it to a group of problems that are similar. So what I would recommend is if you're just drilling and drilling and drilling and not finding much success, maybe take a second, slow down, focus a little bit on your strategy more, and make sure that for each mistake you're committing to never making that mistake again. Other things that can help with that, different programs can help keep you on track. The PrepScholar GMAT program provides a study program that is built based on what you're good at and what you're not good at, what you could still improve on, what you should focus on before your test day. That can help you stay focused on the right stuff. Similarly, we offer small group sessions and tutoring with me and other GMAT experts, which can help you stay focused on the right stuff. Make sure that you're not just working and not getting anything out of it. So those are things that can help with being overwhelmed. What you end up doing is going to depend on you. Hopefully that answers your question. If, again, you have more questions about that, feel free to follow up in the chat. Okay. All right, two very related questions. How long do you recommend studying prior to taking the exam? And then, is a month of good dedicated study enough? It depends. So in general, what I recommend is that for every point you want to improve on the GMAT, you should put in an hour of really good study on your own. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a good baseline score. So maybe taking one of the GMAT prep practice tests and going, okay, this is where I'm starting, and then compare it to your goal score and see how much you want to improve. So if it is realistic that you can get that much study in a month, sure, go for it. But if you are cramming, if you're trying to get in, 50 hours of study a week, no, I would not recommend that. That's not a good idea. Things are not going to stick. And similarly, that study has to be really good, really high quality. So focused on mistakes, not just drilling, not just working for the sake of working. So it depends is the answer. Doesn't really help you. I cannot give you a defined yes or no, will a month work? But like I was saying to the other commenter, doing certain things like signing up with a program or working with a personal tutor can help to ramp that process up faster. Some students are great at self-study. Some students are great at figuring out exactly what they need to do. But for most students, that is not their area of expertise. And there are folks out there like me whose job it is to help students devise a study plan and figure out what is the most important thing for them to be doing and how to most effectively pursue that. So if you are working on kind of a tight schedule, something like tutoring can be beneficial. But I would recommend looking at what you're really aiming for and where you're starting first. Okay. Okay, how much, what kind of a GMAT score is needed to get a scholarship into a top 20 business school? It's going to depend on the school, honestly. And again, these scholarships depend on more than just GMAT scores. There are people with perfect to near perfect GMAT scores who get rejected from top 20 schools. I've seen it happen. So it's not just your GMAT score. That said, top 20 schools are going to have pretty rigorous requirements for GMAT scores. What I recommend is going to their websites and looking it up. We also have some information about this on our PrepScholar blog that you can check out. You're definitely going to want to aim for at least the average score for admitted students in order to get a scholarship, but you're going to need more than that. So I would look at the individual schools that you are interested in first, because there's no general rule that applies across all top schools. Okay. Follow up on our question about work experience. Is it okay to work along with pursuing undergrad to have work experience? Absolutely. In general, they are looking for a couple years of full-time experience. So working along with undergrad is often not enough for exactly what business schools are looking for, but it can provide a really great opportunity to at least get started. And if you are aiming to kind of apply early, kind of chance that a little bit, having some work experience from working while you're in undergrad is great. But again, make sure you don't overwhelm yourself. Your experience in undergrad is important, both for you and your learning, but also for making sure that your GPA is good and that you have all the right prerequisites. So if you can do both, I absolutely recommend it. I recommend taking internships and getting some work experience there. But yeah, may not be enough. Okay. All right. So, all right, so we've got a question. So it says, I'm consistently scoring 30 on verbal with 60% in each section. Not sure what you're asking here. If it's just for general improvement tips, we've got plenty in our videos. But if you have more specific questions about the verbal section and how to improve there, what you're aiming for, feel free to pop those in the chat and I can give you a better response. Okay. All right, got a question. Hi, Erica. I've got a 650 in a Manhattan mock, and I'm having my exam in 20 days. Please advise me on how to increase my score. So 20 days, you're closing in. You're not so close in that you can't learn anything before you get going. So what I would say is your most valuable thing at this point is to take your most recent mock exam and error log it. So go through for all the questions you got wrong or ones that you maybe got right but aren't sure why. Take a second to go through and go, okay, what was the error I made? Why did I make that error? And how can I fix it for next time? And really analyze, focus on that why and that how. So don't just drill and drill and drill for the next few days. Really focus on what am I still missing? Are there any trends here? What can I do differently to not miss those questions next time? The only way to improve your score is to not miss the questions you're currently missing. So that would be my recommendation. If you're still having any issues with timing, I would say that's something to nail down right away to work out your guessing strategy and your checkpoints. So I would recommend that for the next like a week is focusing on that, maybe working through previous practice tests, practice problems you've worked through recently, really building out that error log. And then for when you're a little closer into the test, like your last week, I recommend focusing pretty much exclusively on strategies. So going down that how section of your error log, kind of going, okay, what are my strategies for not making these mistakes? And then kind of making your own list of strategies, maybe adding to it any strategies that you find useful and just studying that. I have some students who make flashcards with prompt and response. So prompt, this is what I see in a question. So when I see exponents, when I see the word any in critical reasoning or reading comprehension, when I see the word integer, when I don't see the word integer, and then that's their prompt. And then when you flip it over, it's the response. So what do I do when I see that? So whatever format you use is up to you, but in those last couple of weeks, drilling is not gonna help. Taking a million practice tests is not gonna help, but focusing on strategy will. Since you have about 3 weeks at this point, you can probably get in one more practice test. I recommend taking it the week before your exam. But yeah, focusing on strategy and focusing on your missed questions is gonna provide you the most value at this point. Okay. La 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 la. Cool. Okay. I'm not sure I understand this question. Okay, so Daniel followed up, applying to 5 graduate schools. A lot of these schools offer GMAT waivers and I'm eligible for them. Awesome. What are your thoughts on me studying as hard for the GMAT? So if you've got waivers, that's cool. That's definitely going to help you out there. I would recommend still prioritizing it and valuing it as much. That said, you do have a little more flexibility to maybe take it once to kind of get a feel for the testing center, get a feel for what's going on, and see how you do, and then maybe study again for a second round. I'm not sure if I totally answered your question, but you are investing in your future here, so waivers or no, I think it's a good idea to really prioritize your GMAT score. Okay. Doo-ba-doo-doo. All right, so someone says, I have 3 years, Rima says, I have 3 years of experience in pharmaceuticals, specifically in lab. Is this experience, will this help me to get admission in business school? So it depends on how you spin it. So this is probably not your like standard experience going into business school, but you can definitely, with any job, focus on the elements that are related to business school. So what did you do in this job that you think will serve you going into the business world? So this will be something that you capture in your essays, in your application. So yes, I say work experience in general is good. It might be valuable for you to get some more targeted work experience, maybe a little bit more in the business field, but no, work experience in general will help you. Just make sure in your application to really target how that work experience has led you to business. Okay, great question from Ishan. Hi, Erica. Is it true that getting the first 10 questions correct in each section sets you up for a high score? No. No. You can get the first 10 questions right and get the rest wrong, and you'll get a low score. You can miss the first 10 questions, get all the rest right, and still get a high score. The first 10 questions do tend to kind of separate you out into big groups. So like above 50%, below 50%, above 75%, below 75%, things like that. But the test does know that there are false positives and false negatives, and generally they don't use one question to check in on something. They'll check it again. So my recommendation here, I see a lot of students who've heard this first 10 questions thing and go crazy on test day because maybe the second question is so hard and or maybe they know how to do it but they just can't figure it out, and so they spend 5 minutes on it and then they've totally not set themselves up for the rest of the section, right? They're stressed for the rest of it, trying to get back on track, maybe miss some questions at the end that they could have gotten right. In general, you should prioritize staying on track, getting to as many questions as possible, and answering the questions that you know you can. So even if in the first 10 questions you're going, I don't know how to do this, even if it's literally the first question, keep in mind your timing, and when it's time to move on, you should. So for the first, couple questions, you can usually afford to go a little bit over that 2-minute buffer, right? Because you're not behind yet. For quant or for verbal, a little bit shorter. You can usually go a little bit longer because you're not behind schedule, but be aware of your timing and don't over prioritize those first 10. So I would say ignore the algorithm. Ignore it. Focus on doing the best that you can. And for problems that are not serving you, problems that will actually hurt you on other problems, cut your losses, even if it's first 10. Okay. All right. Ashmita says, I have 9 years experience with 3.5 GPA, manager in a power company, want to do MBA from an Ivy League college. That sounds great. Sounds like great goals. I don't know if you have a question about that, but I say pursue it. But if you have a specific question, feel free to pop that in the chat. How can I improve in sentence correction? Could you share your insights on the rule of sentence correction? We actually have a bunch of videos about this on our channel that I would recommend checking out. That will probably go into more detail than I'm going to go into here. But a couple of big ideas. For sentence correction, trust the rules, don't trust your ear. Your ear will mislead you. So don't focus on what sounds right, focus on what is right. So kind of a second point on that is focus on finding errors. So one thing I see students doing is kind of reading A and going, okay, reading B and then going like, oh, this one sounds okay. Reading C being like, oh, I don't know. That's not the way to do it. Take a look at your sentence. If there are any obvious errors, go for that immediately. But if nothing's jumping out at you, look at your answer choices and look between them for differences. And then use those differences as potential errors. Then when you find an error, eliminate every answer option with that error. You never have to look at it again. Whether or not it has any other errors, if you know that there is an error in it, you don't have to look at it. So cross it out, rule it out, you're done. So our goal with these should be, if an answer choice is wrong, rule it out. But never rule out an answer choice unless you're sure it's wrong. So that's where knowing our rules is really going to matter. Third point, there are a few rules that will really benefit you, like 10 to 20 rules that are really going to help you. Beyond that, so like memorizing idioms or starting to dig into like the really weird nuances of grammar is not going to help you. So really focus on understanding, how does parallelism work? How do modifiers with which work versus modifiers with ing? How do I set up a logical comparison? What is agreement? What can it relate to? Things like that. So get really comfortable with your rules, but don't focus on anything that is going to show up like once on test day, or if it does show up, or could just never even show up. So I find that idioms in general are not a good use of your time. Focus on your big rules. Anything else about sentence correction? I'd recommend taking a look at our other videos. I have a couple other big tips, such as like the cut the fluff strategy, which is taking out extra descriptive information to make your sentence simpler. But in general, those are my big things. So don't trust your ear. Find your errors and eliminate based on errors. And then really only focus on your big rules. Ignore everything else. Cool. So it should be very much a process. We don't want to reinvent the wheel every time we look at a sentence correction question. Cool. And this is where like an error log can really come into play. So being like, when I see this word, this is what I do. And providing yourself strategies that you can apply to a wide range of problems. Okay. All right, 13 years of work experience in the automotive industry. That's awesome. What should be the kind of GMAT score for some of the good schools? How can your course help me? I have about 3 months of time. So for some of the good schools, so again, it really depends on how you're defining good schools. This is going to depend on your goals. So there are a lot of schools out there that are not like top 10, top 20 that are still good schools and that will help you in pursuing your career. If you are aiming for like top 10, top 20, you're probably looking at least like a 700 to match the average score for admitted students. You can find this information by looking at that specific school. We also have more information on this on our blog. So if you pop over to our blog, go to the section about MBA admissions. There will be more information there about top schools and GMAT scores. How can your course help me? So kind of like I mentioned earlier to other commenters, the course really helps with targeting study to your specific weaknesses. So one thing that you find with studying from a book or studying from a group class is that you're covering the basics, which is really good if you are a complete beginner. But it does mean that sometimes you're spending a lot of time on something you don't really need and not very much time on something you really do need. So the PrepScholar GMAT course, the online program, what it does is it figures out, okay, where are you stronger, where are you weaker, where do you need a little help, where do you need a lot of help, what's the most important thing for you to do before your test day, when is your test day, how much should you study per week, and it builds out a study schedule based on your needs. So what this will help you do is make sure that you're focusing on all the right stuff leading up to test day. Another thing that we offer is tutoring or small group classes. So that's if you need even more support on top of that for understanding things. So our program includes written explanations. So for every problem you miss, there is an explanation for how to solve the problem, how to approach it, and some common missteps that test takers might make. But if you need more support, working with an expert tutor like myself can really help to speed up that process to make sure that you are learning and not just drilling. So yes, that is how it can help. It can make sure that those 3 months leading up to your exam are the most effective possible and that you're studying all the right stuff for you. It also has a 5-day risk-free trial, so if you try it, you don't like it, You can get your money back. No big deal. It also has a 60-point guarantee, which means if you're coming in with an official GMAT score, we guarantee that up to a 740, I believe, up to a 740, we guarantee 60 points improvement from your initial score. So if you're starting with a 700, we only guarantee up to a 740. So if you can show us that, hey, I did not improve 60 points or more on my exam, then we will totally refund the cost of your course. So as long as you have that initial GMAT score, it's completely risk-free. It's a really great opportunity to try it out, to get this customized experience. Yeah, I really recommend it. I think it's a really great opportunity and could help you out a lot. Okay, Rajdeep says, I'm about a month away from my given GMAT date. Finding the clock hard to beat. Given time, my accuracy would be around 70% for medium hard problems in quants. Yes, the clock is hard to beat. That is a big part of this test, is that there is usually not enough time to solve all the problems that you could solve if you had more time. Sometimes you just need to stare at something for a while. Sometimes something you could solve on a normal day, on test day, maybe it's just not coming to you, or, you know, whatever. That happens. My recommendation there would be really prioritize skipping when you should, or not skipping, guessing, making an educated guess when you should, and not getting behind time. So that's biggest priority, is making sure that you're cutting your losses on the right problems. What I found when I got my ESR for my GMAT, my most recent GMAT, is that I spent more time on the questions I got wrong than on the questions I got right, which is horrible, and I don't want that to happen to you. So our ideal situation is that we can identify the problems that we're likely to get wrong early on, or the problems that we're likely to spend a lot of time on early on. The problems that we're likely to spend a lot of time on and still get wrong are the ones we most want to skip. So we want to identify that as early as possible, save time, move on, so we have enough time to get to the problems that we do feel more confident on, that we can get in a reasonable amount of time, or that, you know, maybe it takes slightly longer, but we can still get it. So saving your time on those problems that are really not working for you will help. So that's why I recommend checking in at about 30 seconds into a problem. Don't need to time it on a clock, just use your internal clock and kind of go, okay, do I have a plan? Do I know where I'm going? Do I know what this is asking? Do I know what I have? And if you're going, no, I don't, that's a good one to maybe move on. And save yourself some time for later. So the way I like to frame it, as there is now Erika and future Erika. And future Erika is going to be having a harder time than now Erika. So I can do myself some favors by saving time on the questions I'm working on, by moving on now and helping later Erika get to those problems that might be something I could solve if I just had 10 more seconds. Other thing I would recommend, if you're finding the clock hard to beat, kind of goes hand in hand with this, is to invest time in interpreting the question. What is it asking? What information do I have? And maybe for like critical reasoning or reading comprehension, making a prediction. So that doesn't really apply to you because you're worried about quant. So there it's really interpreting what is the question and what do I have. So what do I have from the question stem, and then what do I have from the statement. So really spend your time interpreting, breaking that problem apart, making sure you've got all the information, that you're answering the right question, and then you can make a better judgment about whether or not you're going to be able to solve in a reasonable amount of time, and whether or not this is worth your time investment at all. So that would be my big recommendation. So focus on interpreting the question and then cut your losses if the problem is not worth your time. Try to spend more of your time on the problems you are likely to get right. Okay, cool. Ivy League college, which gives maximum scholarship to students. So this is not something that is really my area of expertise. I don't do as much with admissions as I do about GMAT. My recommendation here is go to their websites. and look up that information. We have a lot of information on our PrepScholar blog, so you can check out there to see if we have what you're looking for, but I would look at the options presented by those specific schools and see what applies to you. Okay, GPA of around 2.9. Can I still get in? Yes, I've seen it happen, but you are going to have to compensate with other areas of your application. So if you've got a 2.9 GPA and your GMAT score is okay and your work experience is okay, you're going to be looking at a slightly lower tier of schools than maybe the ones you're aiming for. That said, you can have a lower GPA if you've got a standout GMAT and your work experience is awesome, you've got amazing letters of recommendation, things like that, then you have more of a chance. What I would recommend for you is looking at the specific schools you're applying to, looking at their average GPA for admitted students, and then comparing yourself there. And then looking at, okay, what is their average GMAT score? What else are they looking for in applicants? And seeing where you can shine to kind of outweigh what might be a red flag. Okay. All right. Sanath says, I'm consistently hitting a quantitative score of 47. How to improve for 50? Okay, and then a second question, but I'm going to talk about the quantitative. Again, it kind of depends on you and where you are missing questions. My biggest thing for you would be focus on your mistakes. What types of questions are you missing? Are you actually learning from them? So take a second, go to your last practice test and pull out all the problems that you missed and figure out why. Why did you miss them? Was your calculation wrong? Okay, why was it wrong? Was your scratch paper messy? Maybe you're missing a lot of exponent problems. Okay, but why? Is there a rule you're not clear on? Or are you taking too long to work through something? Are you not reducing to primes? Are you falling for a lot of extreme answer choices? I guess that's for verbal, not for quant. Are you falling for the C trap for data sufficiency? Things like that. So kind of figuring out, okay, why am I making these mistakes? And focusing on that. So if you're drilling, stop. Focus on your mistakes. At this level, that's what's going to help you the most. And then secondary question from Sanath, struggle big time with sentence correction, blah, 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 right method. For you, I would probably say make sure that you're really strong on the grammar rules that matter. So a prep course like PrepScholar might be beneficial for you. Yeah, I would probably say that. Make sure that you're really comfortable with, you know, like your basics of agreement, your basics of verb tense, modifiers, parallelism, sentence structure. Get your basics down. Be sure that you know them. Maybe refer to some of the tips on our channel. But staying error focused is going to be the most valuable thing. If you're trusting your ear, you're in trouble. Look for errors. And if you can't find the errors, maybe you don't know the rules very well. So spend time with your rules and look for signals. How do I recognize, okay, I've got a list. Okay, a list means parallelism. Okay, I know my rules for parallelism. Or I see the word than. That means I probably got a comparison. Okay, what am I thinking about for comparison? I'm thinking about logic. I'm thinking about some of my comparison idiomatic structures. And I'm thinking about parallelism again. So kind of recognizing those things. I see a pronoun. I'm looking for agreement. Spending some time, so rules, how to recognize those errors, and then focusing exclusively on errors and not your ear would be my biggest recommendations for you. If you're finding that you're not sure on those rules, probably signing up for a prep course like PrepScholar would be valuable. Maybe working with a personal tutor could help you as well. Okay. All right, Vivek says, I have 2.2 years of experience as a software engineer at a startup. Cool, awesome. I'm living that startup life as well. I left my job for preparation. Is there any chance of selecting in Harvard Business School, Stanford, and Wharton? Yeah. I think you have a decent chance. You have a reasonable amount of work experience, not like crazy high, probably around like the minimum I would recommend. But yeah, as long as the rest of your application is solid, I'd say you have a decent shot. You are aiming for pretty high-tier schools. So make sure also that your GPA is solid, that your GMAT score is solid, and that you have something that really sets you apart. That's going to be the biggest thing with those top-tier schools, is not just, I mean, your GPA has to be on point, your work experience has to be on point, your test score has to be on point, but there has to be something that sets you apart. There are lots of really great candidates who on paper look awesome, they've got all the stuff they need, but there's nothing that really makes them special. So think about that. There are some articles, again, on our blog that can help you with thinking about admittance to top schools. Okay. How easy is it to get research assistantship in college? Not a question I can really answer. I do not really know. It's going to depend on where you are. So in some areas that's going to be easier than others just because of the availability of things like that. It's also going to depend on your qualifications for that kind of thing. Is it entry level? Do you need other sorts of experience to get that? Your availability, things like that. So I don't really know. It kind of depends on what you're shooting for and where you are. For most things, I would just expect that everything's going to take a little bit of effort. And I would expect that you're probably going to be doing some research about what fits you the best. There are probably some things that will fit for you and probably some things that won't. So I can't really answer your question without knowing your specifics. And even then, I don't think I'm the right person to ask. So I would look in your area and see what's available. Okay. Akshara says they need tips for how to score a 700. We actually have 2 videos on that. Tips to score a 700. We've got 9 tips, and then we've got, I think, 7 more tips. Check those videos out. They're on our channel. Those would be my biggest recommendations. I've mentioned a couple of the things already, staying error focused, etc. Making sure that your content knowledge is solid, because at the 700 level, it's not testing content anymore. In fact, it's not testing content, you know, in the several hundreds of points leading up to 700. So, yeah, check out those videos. They'll probably be more beneficial than me talking live about it. It's going to take work. I'd recommend figuring out where you're starting, and that's going to kind of shape what you do. Notes on sentence correction, and then also later how to prepare for quant. So a lot of questions here. I've kind of mentioned sentence correction already. You can rewind a little bit for that. In general, know your like top 10 to 20 rules. Don't focus on the ones that might show up once on the test. Focus on your errors. Don't trust your ear. Was there another thing? I think those are the biggest ones. So know your top rules, focus on your errors, keep it a process. As for quant, that's a super broad question. I can't really provide you anything very helpful on that because there is so much there. I'd say get comfortable with your content first. That's your baseline, that's your foundation. If you don't know your exponents rules, you got to do that first. If you're not comfortable with combinations and permutations formulas, you got to do that first. If you don't know your remainder formula, that's got to happen first. So get comfortable with that first, especially if you're aiming for a 700. You've got to have that really solid groundwork laid, and then from there it's more about interpreting, okay, what is this question asking me to do? What is the test maker trying to get me to do here? All of these questions are going to be traps. So trying to figure out, okay, what is the trap? What does the test maker want me to do, and how do I avoid that is going to be key. So if you want to be more specific, like if there's a certain area of quant you're struggling with, a certain type of question, data sufficiency, geometry, feel free to ask about that, but this is a very broad question, so can't do much with that. Best things to do before 1 week of the exam. Hi, Srinivas. Hey. So my recommendation for a week before the exam would be focus on strategy. And we talked about this recently, but focusing on strategy is going to be the most valuable thing for you. Drilling at this point, not going to be helpful. What I recommend is if you've done an error log, going through your how do I fix it section and really focusing on that. If you have not done an error log, I recommend taking an afternoon to just write down every strategy that you have and keep them general. In general, that prompt response format is good. When I see this, I do this. When I see this, I do this. Going through and writing out all your strategies and then just studying them, reviewing them leading up to your test day. The point of this is if you have like a million strategies but you can't pull them up on test day, or you don't know which one to use on different problems, it's useless. So really reviewing, here are my strategies. I know them, I'm familiar with them, they're at the front of my mind, and I know when to bring them out. That's going to be the most useful thing for you in leading up to test day. Okay. Akshara says, I find it difficult to find an error in the question and sentence correction. In that case, look at your answer choices. Look for the differences between them. Usually you can identify a few. Focus on each difference and go, okay, is this a grammatical error? If it's different in all 5 answer choices, probably not a great one to focus on. But if you see like, oh, 3 answer choices are one thing, 2 answer choices are another thing, or I've got 2, 2, 1, that might be valuable to focus on and go, okay, why would I use one over the other? If it's a pronoun, it's likely agreement. If it is just kind of the sentence but jumbled up, it's likely modifiers. Let's see, some of them have the word and, but some don't. Maybe that's a sentence structure thing. So trying to kind of notice, okay, what are my differences? And then what could they be? That would be my recommendation. Don't just read the sentence and then go, I'm lost. Look specifically at those differences. Those are your potential errors. Some of them may be distractors, some may not be errors, but one of those differences at least is going to be an error. So focus on those. What school am I in? I'm not in school. I work full-time doing GMAT, GRE, other test prep stuff. I did not go to graduate school. So if you are asking graduate school advice, I'm not the best person to ask. I do know some things from being in this industry, but I did not apply to grad school. I did not go to grad school. I took the GMAT because I teach test prep. That might shape some of the questions you ask me. This is a GMAT advice session. So again, if you are looking for specific recommendations for like Harvard or Wharton, we have a video specifically for Wharton. We have a video specifically for Kellogg. We have a video with a Harvard grad. He did not go to business school, but who did go to Harvard. So if you're interested in those things, we have them either on our blog or our channel, but I might not be the best person to ask. But I did get a 770 on my GMAT, if that is any help. All right. I got a 430 on my last GMAT exam. I got depressed and that cost me a year behind schedule for overseas study. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you give me some advice on retaking the test? I need at least 600. So first thing I would say is that typically your second time taking the test goes better than the first. The first time is very stressful, getting used to the whole testing center experience. All of that is a little bit draining and there is a learning curve to it. So I would guess that probably just coming back to it will be helpful. Recommendations that I have, I don't know how much study you put in before, but likely your study is not as effective as it could be. I would say kind of that concept of focusing on mistakes that we've been touching on would be valuable for you. But it seems like maybe your study plan is not as effective as it could be. Maybe you're not maybe your study in general is not as good as it could be. You're not focusing on the right stuff. Maybe you're drilling more than learning from it. In that case, I would probably recommend maybe signing up for the PrepScholar program. It'll help you focus on the right content. It seems probably like at your level, content is still a bit of a struggle. Additionally, I might recommend working with a tutor. You're looking for about 170 point improvement, which is fairly significant. So I would say working with a tutor might help you to kind of hone in on those weaknesses that you still have and really target those in your prep to fix them before your next exam. Okay. We've got a question about assumption questions. All right, assumption questions are great. They are hard for many students. What I recommend thinking of them as is for every argument, right, every passage that you get, you're going to have maybe some background, but you're going to have premises, right? So you're going to have pieces of information that we are assuming to be true, and you're going to have a conclusion. For a question that is an assumption question, there's going to be something that's missing, something that needs to be true that we need to assume in order for our conclusion to work, right? So it's basically an unstated premise. It's something that should be there, but it is not stated. So the best thing that we can do for these questions is to be looking for that assumption while we read the passage and to try to identify, okay, what's missing, right? What is not there? And in an ideal world, we're going to be able to predict that. So this takes a bit of practice. But like with reading comprehension for critical reasoning, I recommend trying to predict every single time to have some sort of guide for your answer before you jump into those answer choices, because all of the answer choices are traps, right? They're meant to be convincing. However, if you predict and it's not one of the answer choices, or you just can't predict, you're totally stuck, you've got nothing. At that point, I'd say maybe go back, spend a little more time with the passage if you've got absolutely nothing. But if you are having to do process of elimination with those answer choices, a really great thing to do with assumption is what, a bunch of places call a negation test, which is basically for every answer choice to go, what if this wasn't true? So an assumption has to be true for the conclusion to work. So if you say, okay, it isn't true, that should mean that the conclusion is not going to work if that assumption is not true. So take that assumption, flip it on its head, go, okay, what if this is not true? It should invalidate the conclusion. If it doesn't invalidate the conclusion, it's not your answer. Those are my biggest recommendations. So first, spend time with the passage, try to predict, look for your unstated premise that needs to be true for the conclusion to be true. And if you have to do process of elimination, try considering, what if this answer choice was not true? Would that negate my conclusion? Okay, tip when running out of time on the actual test. I'm assuming you mean in comparison to practice. Keep an eye on the clock, set yourself clear checkpoints. So for quant, a really good one is every 10 questions, I should be about 20 minutes in. Check on the clock. If you are behind schedule, start guessing faster. Your priority is to get back on track. Some students find that they just lose that focus on the clock on test day. Don't. Have rules for yourself. On question 11, I check the clock. Maybe on every 5 questions. On question 6, I check the clock. And use that to keep yourself on track. If you don't allow yourself to be behind schedule 2 checkpoints in a row, then you should be fine with running out of time. Okay. What would your chances be of getting into top 10-20 with less than a year of experience, and can getting a 720 plus increase my chances of getting in? So a higher GMAT score is always going to increase your chances. If you're aiming for top 20, top 10 or top 20 with less than a year of experience, you might want a higher GMAT score than a 720 to try to balance that out. And the rest of your application is probably going to need to be stellar. Again, like I mentioned before, those top schools, it's not just about having a great GMAT score and a great GPA and a great work experience. It's about having something that sets you apart. So I can't really say what your chances are unless I know what makes you special. So you should try to make everything as good as possible and then have that distinguishing factor. So I would recommend checking out our blog. Applying to top schools is going to be different than applying to, mid-tier schools. So take a look at our blog, see what's there, and that can provide you some better guidance there. Again, if you're looking for your chances, just look at what average experience, average GPA, average test scores, all those sorts of things are for those admitted students, and make sure you're at least average. Okay. What kind of tutoring options do you have from PrepScholar with a month's time left? So PrepScholar offers 4-hour, 10-hour, and 20-hour tutoring packages. We also offer small group sessions starting at like 6 hours, I believe, is the minimum. So we also offer pay-as-you-go. After you purchase an initial package, you can buy another package, or you can go 1 hour at a time, extending on from there. So really, above 4 hours, we can do anything you want. So what I typically recommend for most students is to do about 2 hours of tutoring per week. That tends to be the right amount of study. Some folks can go up to 4 hours per week, so 2 2-hour sessions, but much more than that I don't recommend. At that point it tends to be not very effective. These sessions are meant to enhance your study, so meant to focus on questions that you're still shaky on, meant to be pulling out bigger strategies, meant to build on top of the stuff you can do on your own. When you're meeting too many times per week, too many hours, it doesn't end up being helpful, and you often end up doing things in your session that you can do on your own. So there are plenty of options with a month left. I'd say be realistic about what you can do in a month, but there are lots of things to help you focus on the right strategies leading up to test day. You can check out our website. If you go to our GMAT website, you can just search Google for PrepScholar GMAT, or you can go to our channel. We have lots of links there. You can go ahead and check us out. We have a tutoring page that will have all of the options that you can pursue there. You can also email us at gmat@prepscholar.com with any questions that you have about tutoring, and we can get you set up. Okay. With 20 days left, still the same thing. Basically, we can cater it to the time that you have. With 20 days left, I'd probably say that 4-hour package is probably ideal. 10 hours is going to be really tight, but I think 4 hours would be beneficial. You'll probably focus primarily on strategy and on reviewing your last 1 or 2 practice tests. Is it best to brush up the grammar skills for sentence correction, or better to focus on GMAT-related problems and solve as much as possible? Both. So I would say don't focus on general grammar, focus on GMAT grammar. There are a few specific rules that are going to be valuable for the GMAT, some things that are general grammar that are not necessary for the GMAT, some things that are generally accepted in, casual English that are not accepted on the GMAT. So focus on GMAT grammar, focus on your top rules. Don't focus on things like idioms. Don't focus on weird rules. Focus on the common ones. So what is agreement? What is parallelism? How do these different types of modifiers work? And then see how they're applied in questions. If you jump straight into questions, you're probably going to be a little bit lost. So really brush up on your rules first and then apply them in the questions would be my recommendation. Again, working with like the PrepScholar program or something similar, you're going to get a lesson on a skill. So learn how that skill works, and then you'll get questions for that skill. So it's a really great way to learn and to focus on the most important things and to kind of have that broken down by skill. Okay. The 20-odd rules for sentence correction, are those available in any of the blogs? So we do have sentence correction articles on our blogs. I have a video on this channel called Sentence Correction Order of Operations that I think might be valuable for you. The big categories that we talk about, those are the categories you want to focus on. If you want to get more information on what specifically those rules are, I would recommend signing up for the PrepScholar program. You'll have lessons on the most important rules for the section. So like within modifiers, there's a couple of rules that are important. Within parallelism, there's a couple of rules that are important. In general, these are things you can find floating around the internet, but not condensed in like a really easy to read way. So I would recommend a program would probably be most beneficial if you're looking to just learn all the stuff you need to know. Okay, I'm taking a month off from my office to prepare for the GMAT. Is 1 month sufficient to score 700 plus when I'm studying on my own? Any recommendations? Awesome that you're taking a month off. That's really going to help. In general, focusing more and not having outside stressors can help to make your study more effective. That said, I have no idea because I don't know where you're starting. It totally depends on where you're starting. If you're starting at a 690, you're probably going to be fine. If you're starting lower than that, I don't know. Again, what I recommend is for every point you want to improve, you want to put in about an hour of really solid study. And then it depends on the quality of your study. So if you're just drilling, no, I probably don't think that's going to be enough time. Maybe if you're not trying to improve very much. But if you're doing really good study, utilizing an error log, focusing on your mistakes, there's a really good chance you can do it with self-study. If you are really committed to getting it done in that month, you don't have a whole ton of time to figure out whether you're great at self-study. So I might recommend for you trying out a program or working with a personal tutor. That's generally something I recommend for folks who are working with a tight time budget. Okay. What type of reading material would you recommend for analytical writing? Are journals or scientific papers helpful? In general, for analytical writing, don't prioritize it. It's not very important, is my recommendation. We want to get an average score on analytical writing and on IR, but anything above that is just not necessary. No one cares about it all that much. Yeah, that would be my big recommendation, is don't spend too much time on it. In general, what I would recommend is looking at the MBA website, looking at, they have at least one example essay, taking a look at that, taking a look at the rubric, and then on our blog, we have a bunch of examples of some templates, of some pieces of advice, tips for analytical writing. I would recommend checking those out, but yeah, in general, don't spend too much time on it, is my recommendation. Your quant and verbal score are going to be much more important. Okay, I have my test in 2 days. Wow, what are the most useful test day tips you can offer? I actually have a video on this. It's called Test Day Tips. I think it's something similar to that, or like last minute GMAT tips. Take a look at that. Those are my best tips. Biggest things that I would say right off the bat is do a couple of practice problems on the morning of the test. Read something academic. Make sure your brain is awake. You don't want to be waking up while you're doing your first few problems. Review your strategies the night before, maybe the morning, and in the morning of, you should be able to kind of go through your strategies from memory. So in your 2 days before, study strategy. Don't drill. Morning of, review all your strategies in your head, and then do a couple of practice problems just to make sure you're awake. That's about it. I have a few other things in that video, but check it out. Does the computer pick the question, or do administrators pick the test? The computer. So yeah, it's going to be entirely based on an algorithm, so it's totally computer-based. Your administrator is not going to do anything except provide you more scratch paper and let you go to the bathroom. That's about it. Okay. Can you prepare for verbal in 1 month? So I'm getting a lot of these questions. I don't know. It depends on where you are. You're going to have to be very analytical. So the whole purpose of the PrepScholar program is that every student is different, and every student's study experience is going to be different. It's going to depend on where you start. It's going to depend on how much time you have. It's going to depend on where you're starting for different sections, for different question types. It's going to depend on your ability with timing, all these sorts of things. So can you prepare for verbal in 1 month? Maybe, if you're already starting strong. Maybe if you're not aiming for a particularly high score. But if you are starting from nothing, trying to get a high score, and trying to cover all of verbal, probably not, would be my would be what I would say there. If you want to provide me more information, I can give you something more specific. But verbal section does encompass a lot of question types. So yeah, I can't give you anything more specific without more details. How to improve a score from a 650. So you're kind of hitting toward that upper bound. At this point, it's going to be probably less content and more strategy focus. Again, focus on your mistakes. Pinpoint what types of questions you're missing, and focus on, okay, how do I not miss this in the future? What I see a lot of students doing is when they miss a question, they go, oh, shoot. And that's it. They go, I won't miss it next time, but they don't have any active plans for it. For every question, make an active plan for how not to miss it. If you don't know how not to miss it, you're going to miss it again. So do research. If you're self-studying, check it out on forums, search this question online, search the topic online, spend time with it, rework it a few times. There are lots of forums out there that can help you with specific problems. But if you are not sure where you're going wrong, then something like personal tutoring can really help. All right. 3.4 GPA, 1 year work experience, good enough for top programs. It's going to depend on what the rest of your application looks like. I'm going to say that's probably going to be lowish for top programs. You probably want more work experience, and there's not much you can do about your GPA at this point, so you're probably going to want to balance it out with more work experience, a really killer test score, and some really great letters of recommendation, and a really strong rest of your application. Which books are best except for official guides? The official guide is probably your best. Anything that you buy on the MBA store is going to be super high quality because it's the makers of the test. How to know what else? You're going to have to do your research. Programs like PrepScholar, we base all of our questions on real questions. We've done a ton of research on the real exam, so our questions are about as accurate as you can get them. So that's one thing I would recommend. Our program is really good. Take advantage of free trials to try things out. So the PrepScholar GMAT program has a 5-day risk-free trial. If you don't like it within 5 days, you can get a full refund. That will allow you to try it out and see what's good. You can also look at reviews online, but my general recommendation is do your research, and that's going to be the most beneficial thing. Much stronger in verbal than in quant. Should I start the test with the verbal section or rev up to it with the other up to options? That's a great question. Start with quant. I recommend this for most students, even if your quant is a little bit stronger, because quant tends to take more focus. It tends to have a lot more little things that you have to pick up on. It tends to be a lot more detail-oriented, and it tends to be more of a time struggle for a lot of students. So I recommend starting with quant pretty much in general. If you are way stronger in quant than in verbal, tend to really get tired in the verbal section, maybe then take verbal first. But you can always test this with, for instance, the GMAT prep practice test. You can try in different orders and see which works better for you. But I'd recommend if quant is weaker, definitely start with quant. Always save AWA and IR for the end because they're the least important. Do it when you're tired and not 100% on it. Okay. Yeah, Srinivas, we did talk about it. All right. Yam says, in which order should I take the GMAT sections? Just answer that. So yeah, generally I recommend quant first. If you're way weaker on the verbal, maybe consider verbal first. IR and AWA at the end, always. Okay, so asking GRE or GMAT, what is the most appropriate for getting scholarships? So it's going to depend on where you're looking for schools. So some scholarships may be dependent on GMAT scores, not GRE scores. In that case, a GRE score would not be a great choice. Look at the schools that you're interested in. Most business schools accept GRE scores. So if you're looking for kind of a general scholarship, probably a GRE score is going to be fine, but take a look. So yeah, confirm that your schools all take the GRE, and confirm that any specific scholarships you're looking at, you can get them with a GRE. And then after that, it's going to depend on which test you're stronger on. In general, the recommendation is if you are stronger on verbal than on quant, GRE is a better bet. If you're stronger than quant than on verbal, GMAT is a better bet. Yes. But you can always try it. There are free tests available for both from the makers of the exam, so you can always test. Take a practice test for each, see how it goes. Don't take them right in a row, because whatever the second test is, you're going to be more tired. It's not going to go as well, so space them out by a couple of weeks, and then use that to judge. Okay, we are low on time, but I'm going to try to get to the rest of the questions. How much should I get in my mock test to take the GMAT? Totally depends on what you're aiming for. I recommend trying to get at least your goal score. Sometimes folks get their goal score in practice and don't get it on test day because they haven't sorted out their anxiety, or maybe the test day situation, ramps up that anxiety more. So it's often good to score over your goal score. Sometimes things really come together on test day and you score higher, but I recommend trying to get to your goal score before you go into the exam. How to beat the heat of verbal. I like that. So most important things are going to be checkpoints. Make sure you're staying on target time-wise. For sentence correction, staying focused on errors. It's going to help you. For verbal, read your passage before you look at the question, before you look at the answers, make a prediction for your question. For quantitative, or sorry, not quantitative, for critical reasoning, read the question before you read the passage, then read the passage to answer the question, then predict before you look at your answer choices. So predicting for both reading comprehension and critical reasoning are going to be really important. For sentence correction, it's staying really focused on errors. Those are the biggest things. Getting your reading strategies in order is going to be really important for reading comprehension and critical reasoning. We have a video on predicting that I think you'll find helpful. It's specifically for reading comprehension, but it is applicable to critical reasoning. We also have a video on like #1 critical reasoning trick that's about keyword skimming that will help you with reading the passage. In general, when you're reading passages, the most important things are going to be first and last sentences and sentences with transition words, anything with a call to action. So getting your skimming strategies in order, not reading any detail, and trying to interpret as you go is going to be really important there. So that's a lot of information. We have some videos on these topics. I think we are putting out a video on how to read reading comprehension passages soon, so that might help you if that is specifically your area of focus. If you're looking for more than that, I would probably recommend signing up for a program. It sounds like your concerns are pretty broad, so something like the PrepScholar GMAT program would help you to kind of target which specific areas you should be working on. GPA needed for Harvard, you can look that up on our blog. We have that information there. You can also look it up on the Harvard website. Again, that GPA is not going to be a guarantee, and that's not to say that anything below won't get you into Harvard. But yeah, I would recommend looking at averages for that school. Okay. How much reading comprehension speed is going to help in, or reading speed is going to help in reading comprehension? It's less about how quickly you read the words and more about how many words you read and how you interpret those words as you go. So kind of like I was saying before, we don't want to read every single word in a reading comprehension passage. There are some sentences you're just going to skip wholesale. Anything that's description or extra explanation or examples, you're not going to read it. Not important. But the sentences you do read, interpret them as you go. Why is the author saying that? What are they saying? What is its function in the passage? What is the passage as a whole saying? Why was this passage written? What is the tone? What's the organization? If you are interpreting the sentences you do read and only reading the important sentences, you're going to do much better. So it's less about how quickly you read. So don't take a speed reading course. I don't recommend that. But at the end of every paragraph, just kind of stop and go, what did I read? What was the point of that? And that will help you more. If you have more questions, pop them in the chat. What are the best ways to prepare for probability and geometry questions in quant? If you don't know any of your formulas, memorize them. We have a bunch of them on our blog, so I'd recommend checking that out. So first, have your formulas, have your foundation of knowledge. Beyond that, for geometry, what I recommend is drawing a diagram, labeling literally everything. When you find a piece of information, write it down, and then for every piece of information, go, what can I do with this? What can I do with this? What can I do with this? I find that if you are messing up geometry, it's because you haven't used a piece of information. For probability, if you're really comfortable with your equations, if your formulas, that's really going to help. What I also recommend is considering each situation individually and really having a good understanding of your situation. Even if you know all your formulas, if you don't know what formula to apply to this situation, you're going to be stuck. And often it's not just a formula, it's a formula and then you're doing something on top of it. So spend time with interpreting the questions is going to be your most valuable thing. Don't jump into solving before you're ready. Some sites to take GMAT mock tests. Free mock tests. Okay, so specific. So the best free mock tests are going to be the ones from GMAT Prep, that free software that you can download from the MBA website. So those are official tests. They also have other tests there, but they are paid. those are going to be the best, but they are paid. In terms of other mock tests, everything else is going to be unofficial, but a lot of test prep companies offer a free exam that you can try out. We do not at PrepScholar. We use official tests only. Our quizzes are the ones where we use our own problems. But I know that there are some from a bunch of other test prep companies. I think Manhattan Prep has a free one. I think Veritas Prep has a free one. There are probably more. Yeah, try to go with a company you trust. If it's not, there are probably free tests out there where the questions are not 100% realistic. So know that. The tests that are real are going to be better judges of your score, so it might be worth it to shell out for those real tests. And they're also going to be better practice because they're realistic and the algorithm is good. So, okay. How much work experience is necessary for the GMAT exam? You don't need any experience to take the test. The test is something you can take with zero experience. In fact, work experience should have really nothing to do with the test itself. For getting into business school, I recommend a few years. You're going to have a harder time if you have less than a few years, but I would recommend looking at your specific schools and looking at what they're interested in. You could talk to an advisor, might be a good idea. Okay, some unrelated comments. Okay. Do schools take a negative view of multiple GMAT attempts? No. In general, it shows dedication. It shows that you are willing to put in the effort to improve your score. Oftentimes, schools are pretty straightforward. If you apply and you're a borderline candidate and a better score would help you, they will tell you to retake. So no, it doesn't look bad. That said, you can only take the GMAT once every 30 days, and you have an 8-test lifetime limit. So don't just take the test because you can. Take the test because you think you're ready. Okay. 710, nice, that's already a great score. Looking at is 740, 750. Didn't have any luck with quant. Aim at applying only to the top 20 B schools. So first things first, I would recommend applying to some schools that are maybe outside of the top 20 just to make sure that you do get in somewhere. Kind of the concept of reach schools, match schools, safety schools, and super safety schools. If you are only willing to go to business school if you get into a top 20, then that's fine. But if you are applying only to top schools, you are putting in jeopardy going to business school. So you may not go, and if that's okay with you, know that, but in general I would recommend including some schools that you would be okay with going to that are a little bit more likely you're going to get in. As for the rest of this, there isn't really a question here, but again, if you're trying to improve at this level, it's going to be very focused on improving on your specific mistakes. So try to identify what those are. If you're having trouble, I recommend working with a personal tutor like myself. You can sign up on the PrepScholar website if you're interested. Similarly, if you sign up for the completely customized course, you can get an hour free tutoring right now. This promotion isn't going to last forever, but that is something you can do right now. Oh, there is a question. Sorry. Do you suggest I retake the GMAT exam? It depends on what you're aiming for with those schools. And it also depends on how much time you have before you're applying. If that is around the average for the top school you're applying to, which I'm guessing it probably isn't, I would say leave it. But if it's still below the average for your top school, I would say it might be worth your time. That said, at this point, you do have a bit of time before like first round applications, but as you get closer to application deadlines, focusing on your application is going to matter as well. It's not just GMAT score, but yeah, if you are committed to getting that 740, 750 range, I'd recommend trying out personal tutoring. It can really help. Okay. You have 20 more days for preparation. What should be your approach now? I've answered this question a couple of times during this session, so you can rewind and look at it. But in general, it's going to be, if you've been logging your errors so far and doing analysis, looking at your strategy, I recommend taking a practice test the week before your exam, and then the week before between that practice test and your exam, I recommend focusing on your weaknesses, your mistakes, really going, okay, how do I fix that? Let me focus specifically on that. And in the few days before your exam, exclusively memorizing your strategies and memorizing when you use them. That's going to be your biggest thing. At this point, there's probably a couple more things you can learn, but once you get into like the last week, 2 weeks before your exam, you're probably not going to learn anything else for content. So focus on your strategies and when you can use them, and make sure they're ready to go on test day. Okay. Just Chill says, can I get a top B school with an above average cumulative GPA and less extracurriculars? Maybe. Probably. Usually it is kind of a balancing act between something that's lower and something that's higher. You should look at the schools you're interested in and check how your GPA compares, how your extracurriculars compare. For top business schools, you are going to have to be extraordinary in some way. And even if you are extraordinary, you're going to have something that captures that business school, and that is something that isn't already going to be taken by another prospective student. So there's no guarantee ever, but in general, yes, if you got something that's kind of low, trying to balance it out with something high can be valuable. If your extracurriculars are low, often it's a good idea to get more work experience or do more things before you apply, because that's something that you can fix with just time. Okay. At what interval should you take the mock test? I recommend no more frequently than every 2 weeks. If you've got more time, you may want to space it out a little more because there aren't that many mock tests out there. But I recommend taking one the week before the exam. How much do they help as part of preparation? They are very important. One, they help you get used to the stamina of the test. They help you get used to the timing of the test, but they're also a really great opportunity to target your mistakes, to go, what am I still missing? And then to really learn from them. So if you take the test, you go, oh, that's not a great score, or that's fine, and then you don't do anything with the questions you missed, it's still valuable for timing and stamina and practice, but you're not getting nearly as much out of it. So I recommend spending as much time reviewing your mistakes and pulling strategies out as you do taking the test. If you need help with that, personal tutoring is a really great option for you. Can you get into B school with less than 1 year work experience? Answered this a couple times. Maybe. The rest of your application needs to be stunning. You did mention that you're low on extracurriculars. If you're low on extracurriculars and work experience, you're probably going to have a hard time. This may not be the year for you to apply. If everything else is really good, you've got really great letters of recommendation, maybe you know someone at the school, things like that, then maybe you've got a better shot. But I would consider applying. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. It's a real investment, so this may not be the right time for you. Okay. Yes, your GPA will matter, even with a really great test score. Sorry. A really good test score will help balance out your GPA. There are some schools that care less about GPA, probably not top tier schools. You're probably going to have more of a hard time with top 20. That's not to say it's out of the question if the rest of your application is stunning. But yes, GPA will matter. We have an article about that on our blog about what to do if you have a low GPA, so I recommend checking that out. Again, if you go to the PrepScholar blog, you can just Google it, and then there is a section on the sidebar specifically for B school admissions. It should be in there. Do schools care about the scores for each section, or do they only care about the total score? Amazing question. Thank you, Minna. They care about the scores for each section. In general, aim for a balanced score. So if one score is way higher than the other, in general, schools don't like it, even if it comes out to the same total score as something more balanced. So if you have a higher percentile, not numerical score, a higher percentile in one section, focus on the other one, bringing it up. You want to get about the same percentile. Numerical scores, don't look at them. They don't really matter. The percentile does. So try to get them as balanced as possible. Schools will look at that. So yes, it does matter. Great question. How do you get a total scholarship? Gonna depend on where you're looking at. I would recommend doing some research. totally depends. There are lots of different things that can get you scholarships. So it can just be merit-based. It can be specific merit-based. There are things out there that might be specific to you depending on your goals and your interests, the things that you do, etc., your background. So I'd say do some research, see what might be available to you. I'm pretty sure we have an article on scholarships and how to get them on our blog, so check that out. If we don't have what you're looking for there, a Google search will help a lot. I don't know what that stands for. So someone says, is MIM worthy to do or wait and go for MBA? Maybe I'm just totally missing what that is. Let me Google that. See if that helps. Metal injection molding, I'm guessing, is not what you're asking about. Oh, Master of Management. What? Is that what you want? Yes. Okay, cool. Is it worth it? It depends on what you're aiming for. Could be. But it does totally depend on what you're going for. I would recommend doing some research for your specific field. Maybe if you're aiming for like a specific company, asking them. If you have any like mentors in your field, talking to them about it. It just really does depend. Some roles are going to require an MBA. That's just what it is. So do your research is what I would say. Okay, gotta find math score. Completely screwed up your verbal section. I don't even know why. Thinking about getting a tutor. What do you think? Yes, if you don't know why, that's the biggest thing. A tutor will help you figure out why and figure out how to address it. So yes, I would recommend it. You can get tutoring from me or another PrepScholar GMAT expert. Head over to our website, and there is a tab for tutoring. You can sign up for intervals of like 4, 10, or 20 hours of tutoring, and then once you sign up for that initial package, you can add on as many hours as you want. So I would recommend that for you. That sounds like a really good idea. No problem. Happy to answer these questions. Thanks so much for everyone who is here. If you have any last minute questions, throw them in the chat. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes. We kind of went over time, but these were all great questions. If you have any further questions, specifically questions about PrepScholar and what PrepScholar can do for you, you can learn more about us at our website, and you can learn more about us at our blog. So our blog actually is probably not going to tell you much about us, but it's going to give you more advice. Our YouTube channel is going to give you more advice. We recently put out a video for how to sign up for PrepScholar GMAT. If you're interested in giving that free trial a shot, check out that video. It'll help you out. If you are interested in just learning more about us, our website will be more helpful. You can also shoot us an email at gmat@prepscholar.com. If you have general GMAT questions, that's not a great place to ask. Probably wait until our next live stream or put it as a comment on this video. But if you have questions about the PrepScholar program, we can advise you on what would be the best bet over email. That said, we do have that 5-day risk-free trial. So if you just want to try it, go for it. Again, we have personal tutoring and small groups available. They are led by me and other PrepScholar GMAT experts. So if you want to work with me individually, get your questions answered by me, work on some more specific problems, things like that, you can always sign up. Check out our website. We have about 1 million links to it on our YouTube channel, on our other videos. When this video goes live, we'll also put the links there. So yeah, if you have any questions, you can email us, check out our website. You can also leave them in the comments here. Okay, wow, couple of last minute questions. Boldface, yes, the questions do look, or the answers can look pretty sophisticated. My recommendation is predict. So go through and kind of go, okay, what was the point of this sentence? What was the point of this sentence? Looking at context can really help. So come up with your own prediction first. When you're looking at those answer choices, try to take them from general to specific. So it says it's an example of a phenomenon. Okay, what is the example? And then come up with what that is. Okay, what is the phenomenon? If you can't come up with a phenomenon, that's not the right answer. So predict and take the answer choices from general to specific. Books for self-study. If you're not set on a book but would be okay with an online program, the PrepScholar program is really great for specifically getting to the stuff that you need to get to. So your study plan will be targeted to what you demonstrate as being strengths and weaknesses. So that will have lessons that are specifically targeted and at your level, and then you'll have quizzes that are based on that, and then depending on how well you do on those quizzes, you'll be assigned more lessons and quizzes. You might have to repeat some, you might go up or down a level, things like that. That's really great for self-study because it is targeted to you, which is normally something you can only get with a personal tutor. Otherwise, if you're just looking for practice problems, I recommend things from GMAT, so official GMAT problems, so the official guides are great. There are exam packs that are really useful that you can also get on their website. If you are looking for more kind of general learning the content, there isn't too much that's great that's from GMAT. So there you're probably just going to want to do your research. If you're set on a book, I would say Google it. We also have some breakdowns of GMAT resources on our blog, so go ahead and check that out. We have some great articles there. Can we choose the instructor to work with? You can request. It is going to depend on availability. In general, if you request, say, me, I will be able to fit you into my schedule. So I say it's worth a shot. Go for it. You can always send an email and request to work with that instructor before you sign up. So if you're set on working with someone in particular, feel free to send in an email. If a person has no work experience, can they take the GMAT? Yes. You can take the GMAT without work experience. That's totally fine. You can take the GMAT without a college degree. But will you be able to get into grad school without a college degree or work experience? Less likely. So for the GMAT itself, you can take it whenever. Your scores are only going to be valid for 5 years though, so when you take it, be sure that you want to apply in the next 5 years. How to improve on reading comprehension, we've talked about that a little bit. Biggest things, read the passage before the question. Don't read every part of the passage, focus on important parts, so first and last sentences, sentences with transition words, anything with a call to action, and then note tone words. When you read the question, predict before you look at the answer choices. Those would probably be my biggest things. So read the passage before you look at the questions, interpret as you go, only read the most important parts. At the end of the passage, at the end of each paragraph, kind of pause and go, what was this telling me? What was the point? And then predict for the questions before you look at the answer choices. Test stamina. How do you improve your performance in the last section? Sorry, struggling to talk. I would say try to have longer study sessions. If you're only studying for like 30 minutes at a time, that's not going to help very much. So try to do multi-hour study sessions, like once a week, maybe a couple times a week, to try to get that in place. Make sure to take a practice test like every couple of weeks for practice. Take your breaks, and during the sections, take time to reflect. So not reflect, to reset. So you're going to be looking at the clock on checkpoints. You're going to be taking a second to make sure you're on target. Use that time to kind of, I'm still in this, right? So take a little bit of time to kind of reset during the test. Make sure you're good, make sure you're focused, make sure you're not frazzled, and make sure you're leaving what you've done before behind you. That can help. But yeah, really take advantage of your breaks. Yeah, so practice, spend more time with long duration study, and then in your test, take advantage of breaks and take time to reset even in the middle of a section. All right, one final question. Since your test is the day after tomorrow, what is the best snack or drink to take to the exam? I love it. So in general, you're not going to be able to get things out of your locker during the exam unless you have like medication. So I would say, in general, don't really bring anything. Your breaks are not very long anyway, so it's really good to just use the bathroom and breathe and think about your strategies for your next session. They will have water at your testing center. I don't think there are testing centers that don't have water. So that's what I would recommend. Eat before your exam. Eat a bit before your exam, so you have time for like the sugar to hit your system, and so you don't like get sick. Don't eat anything weird, don't eat anything too heavy. Yeah, eat before the exam, eat enough that you won't be hungry during the exam. That's probably what I would recommend. Yeah, that's what I would say. Oh, and wear layers. That would be my other recommendation to you. In case you get too hot or too cold, you can adjust accordingly. That helped me a lot on test day. I'm very temperature sensitive. Ashish, it's gonna depend on you, where you're starting, and what you're aiming for. So, dunno. In general, recommendation is put in an hour of really good study for every point you want to improve. So start by getting a good baseline test score, and then use what you're aiming for to judge. And then try not to cram if you're studying for more than like 15 hours a week. Probably your study after that point is not going to be effective. Does an internship count as experience, or is it worth it? Yes, it does. Absolutely do it. It probably won't be equivalent to full-time experience, but it is experience, so definitely do it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap up. Thank you so much for your questions. If you have any more, feel free to pop them in the comments when this video goes live. We're just gonna let it process, and then it should go live later today. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you have any questions about PrepScholar, you can email us at gmat@prepscholar.com, or you can check out our website for more information. I would love to meet you personally if you want to work with me. There is tutoring available, and there is a free trial for a risk-free trial for our online program. You will have to pay to start, but your card will only be charged after those 5 days. So if you do not like it, you can get a refund. And then there is also that 60-point guarantee. So if it doesn't work for you, there's no harm, no foul. Okay, a couple more questions here. I am going to cut off here. Go ahead and leave those in the comments. I can also respond in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you guys next time.